a little bit of time because I know that there's a lot of Bama fans here and a lot of people that hate Bama and want to talk about that game earlier today. I've got some comments about Bill O'Brien and his approach to football in general, or maybe life, whatever.
Try not to get us demonetized.
Well,
we don't make much money as it is, but
you tried so hard that you said heck instead of hell. So I think I'll do my best. Before we get into the criticisms I have of how just mind-numbingly crazy Bill O'Brien's approach to offensive football is, give me your general feel for that game, because I picked Alabama not to cover, but I still picked 34-17. I thought it was going to be pretty comfortable. Both of us picked in that 13 to 17 points range, so it wasn't way off there. Tell me what you saw in this game in general, things that you like from Texas, things you like maybe from Alabama defense, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, is that all? You want me to just preview the whole game? I'll hit the highlights.
Just stay off Alabama offense, because I'm going to get all over that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, I had the game 42-13. Obviously, I was wrong by a lot. But this is one of those where I make a lot of people mad quite frequently, where I say we were kind of on top of half the game and then missing in the other. You had Texas with 17. I had them with 13. From a Texas score perspective, that's not horrible, right? I mean, they scored 16 points in the game. So the problem was the Alabama offense. And I'll hit on a couple things. One, it was obvious from the jump that Sarkisian had a really good game plan for Alabama. They did a lot of things that give Alabama issues. Alabama uses a lot of man coverage. They roll guys down a lot in coverage. And what Texas would do would sort of overload one side and then leave a receiver isolated on the other. And that's why they kept getting these big shot play opportunities early on. And they were very intentional when they did it. That Kyrie Jackson is a junior college transfer that gave up some big plays, including a big touchdown in the national championship game when he was having to start due to injury. And they really picked on him early. McKinstry gave up some penalties that were really big, but it was him early that they were targeting with that. And that's when Ewers was in the ball game. And it was obvious why they had Ewers in. He can hit those big shots. And it was a good matchup. And so it was sort of like we sort of theorized, you put the guy in that can hit the shot play you need to hit when it's available. And that's exactly what they were doing. They weren't asking him to make any reads. And a couple things obviously changed. One, Ewers goes down hurt. I already tweeted about this. I'll be the one to own it. But, they're doing a naked bootleg. It's red. He spins around, sees the guy, jumps in the air to throw it away over the stands, and he gets hit in midair. I kind of consider it a bang-bang play. I'm not really sure what the outside linebacker can do when they collide in midair other than land on him. Maybe he could have tried to roll off, but it's just sort of the reality of it. And to a little bit with Ewers, you've got to do a little better job protecting yourself, kick the field goal, and win the game and win the next game, right? But when that happened, two things occurred. One, Alabama changed their secondary personnel, which the commentators never picked up on. They played a different set of corners at that point, and Card came in the game. And Card was actually pretty effective for a while until he sprained his ankle. That changed the whole dynamic, because at that point, Texas had really no passing game because they couldn't get any velocity with Card. Alabama knew what was going on, and Alabama on their side started to go completely into a shell. So you said you didn't want me to talk about offense. That game started hot. Remind me a lot of Alabama's game against Florida, where they nearly lost, where they started hot. They were up 21-3, and then it was 3-5, 3-and-outs in a row. Florida ends up losing by 2 points because they were able to come back. And maybe you want to talk about where they went ice cold and why this game ended up being so down to the wire.
Yeah, for the second and third quarter, Alabama had 6 possessions, 1 first down, and 23 offensive yards. And, a lot of people will say, well, Texas, and they said this on the broadcast a lot, like Texas defense didn't make them do wide open drops. They didn't make them get delay game penalties. They didn't make them run the play clock down to 1 second every time. And this is where my biggest issue with any offensive coordinator that would do this. We were very critical of Alabama last year when we would see Bryce Young just march down the field in a 2-minute type scenario where they either went fast or it was actual 2-minute, just bam, 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 like not letting him overthink. And he was just very efficient and just a surgeon, right? What did they do against Texas A&M, against Auburn, against Florida, like against LSU, these weird super checks, like multiple checks at the line of scrimmage, late motion. So like 4 seconds left on the clock, and they're putting people in motion. And then Bryce Young going up and doing checks with the center with 5 seconds left on the clock. So he's going up with 5 seconds, has to make a check, and is getting back and snapping the ball 1 second on the clock. This is insane to me. And this, to me, when you think about like 1 first down and 6 possessions over 2 quarters of football, that's a coaching issue. That is weird, because that's not something you would see. Vanderbilt beat Hawaii 63-10, right? That Hawaii team's playing Michigan tonight. They probably didn't have 6 straight possessions without a first down with only 23 yards. That means it's something weird in coaching, because this is a 5-star city. So it's crazy to me that when like a non-coaching person with normal eyeballs can see this and see Alabama marching on the field when they're not overthinking it. And then what do we see for 2 quarters? This just slog of an offense. And then Josh giving the defense a signal when they're going to snap, because when you're getting it down to 1 or 0 seconds every time, you're letting them know, hey, we're about to snap the ball. Go ahead and get you a head start. And then you got offensive linemen having to hold their position for 30 seconds, getting false starts. So Josh, to me, I want you to talk about like what in the world is Saban and O'Brien seeing to get them to stick with this? If you were Nick Saban, wouldn't you step in and say, hey, look, this is plain as day. We got 2 different offenses, one that's good, one that's terrible, and you need to fix it.
Yeah. Sorry, he's just watching, trying to keep it on Kentucky. Trying to keep it off screen, right? Again, try not to get demonetized. But I think Kendall gave us a super chat, which thank you, but at the same time also gave us a cool piece of information with the super chat. So that's kind of fun. He said he only noticed 19 plays in the game where they snapped the ball with more than 6 seconds on the clock, and that's a problem.
It's insane.
It's really nuts. And when you're in a really loud, hostile environment and you're on a clap count, it's hard as it is to keep the defense to know when you're snapping the ball. But when you're waiting till there's 3 seconds on the clock, they know when you clap, the ball's coming out, right? They know clap, snap. They know it's happening. They know you're not going to go on 2. So it's a huge advantage to the defense every time that happens. And I think it's kind of baffling, because it's something we talked about a lot with Alabama last year that they did it. There's also a lot of stuff that's kind of weird to me that they don't seem to be running. One, I don't feel like the RPO is a thing for them anymore. And I get that the RPO has lost some effectiveness, but that zone RPO read offense thing, having that in your offense keeps the defense honest. It keeps them reading you honestly. And those are just sort of simple plays that you should be mixing in. And there's just not a lot in that offense that I feel like is particularly well designed or particularly easy for the quarterback. When we were talking back and forth about it, watching it live, the point I made was just because you have a quarterback that can do something doesn't mean that they should. And I think Bryce Young is capable of making checks at the line, and he's capable of making reads. But why you ask him to do that on every play is just beyond me. You have all the rules you have in college where you can put it on the sidelines, take some of that mental load off of Bryce Young. We talked about this middle of the season last year, and it's honestly baffling that we're saying it again, and let him focus on the play that he's about to run. Because there were times, to be critical of Fox's broadcast, it was really hard a lot of times to see what the routes really were. But sort of you could see on replays when they go back and look at it, he had guys on crosses and meshes and swings that were open pretty good amount of the time. They talked about the coverage was good, and that was true sometimes, but a lot of times it wasn't that perfect, or at least there were holes that could have been read, and he wasn't delivering the ball.
Josh, isn't it kind of like what we saw the last 3 drives of the game where they just moved right down the field? Was there all day. It's just what they were doing pre-snap was kind of messing that flow up.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And when you talk about the last few drives, it's not like Alabama was bombing down the field, right? They didn't have separation to just blow them over the top every time. The point was there was stuff underneath for 7 to 12 yards of play on a fairly consistent basis, as there is with any talented offense against a defense. And Bryce, for whatever reason, wasn't seeing it. And so it really slowed them down and got them out of sync. One thing that I do want to say there is you have to give some credit to Texas and their coverage. I mean, I don't give a lot of credit to it. We talked about why, it's a bit of a paper tiger in our preview, but this is, in theory, college football team talent on 247 Sports. Shout out to Josh Pate. This is the number 6 talented team in the country. They are, in theory, more talented than USC. They are more talented than Oklahoma. They're more talented than Notre Dame. They're more talented than LSU. I don't know that they play up to that, but in terms of size and speed and ability to run with Alabama and jam them, they are as well equipped as anyone. And I do think that was a huge component to it, is that Alabama wasn't able to bully them. And I'll be curious from a strength and conditioning perspective, developmental perspective, certainly a technique perspective, if this is something that continues forward, because they looked way more like a team that, reflects their talent level. Now, I still think a lot of it was Alabama being off, but Texas wasn't making it easy either. So you kind of have to keep that in mind.
I think Texas is a good and improved football team. I don't think they're the kind of team that's so good it can take a team full of 5-star players and make them not get a first down for 2 quarters. That to me is a different, and that's why I'm a little hesitant to be like, last year I thought I made the mistake of thinking Florida was really good because they played Alabama really close. Now I think that a lot of it is self-sabotage. And like Ohio State, I'm going to drop Alabama in my rankings. They deserve to be dropped after today because a lot of what they did is self-inflicted. But like Ohio State, they've got a loaded roster that can obviously figure it out. Alabama looked just like this against Auburn last year and then waxed Georgia the next weekend. Talk a little bit too, though, Josh, about this weirdness of the really strange number of penalties from Nick Saban teams. To me, I think this is a little unprecedented because you don't see this level of penalties and self-inflicted stuff from bad teams. Is there something there for a team that is so used to just killing people that when it's close at the half or whatever, they see a team can go maybe blow for blow with them, that they take on some sort of persona that's overly tight, that's overly mistake prone because they're trying to be too perfect. And they've been shocked a little bit because they're they don't play like this against Georgia because they're used to Georgia giving them a game. Is there something there because of who they are that it's actually making them kind of go on full tilt in these games against lesser competition?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Elite the Falcon, one of the commenters, pointed out that Stetson Bennett today in their game against Samford was really off. I mean, they were super sharp against Oregon, but kind of playing against air, against lesser competition. They were actually missing a lot of plays that they executed last week. Teams are up and down, and I think you can overly psychoanalyze why that is. There's a lot of reasons for it. It was 116 degrees on the field today at Texas. You could tell the field was extremely slick. Everybody on both sides was slipping and falling down early on. And I don't know, between the heat, between kind of getting punched in the mouth from Texas offensively, being on a hostile environment, maybe Alabama didn't handle it really well. I don't know. I mean, most of the penalties came in the first half. They kind of came in bunches. And it's really not a unique thing when you talk about Alabama's upsets. They've generally come pretty early in the year. The A&M game was, I think, the beginning of October. The Ole Miss games are the big examples people throw out, and they were around the 3rd game of the season, as I recall. And Alabama always has a lot of roster turnover. They do this year too, and I think sometimes it isn't gelled, and the guys aren't as cohesive, and maybe that culture isn't built. I don't know. But I definitely think, with the Georgia example, teams that are playing with that ranking do tend to get in their own head a lot. Ohio State with the Boilermakers, right? Just had a total meltdown. It's a common thing to have one of those. Usually you have a meltdown and everybody kind of has a reality check and then they coalesce. It's a real common thing in football. But I mean, I couldn't tell you why it is. It just seems to be something that happens.
Yeah, and we got to move on, but I will say this is why I'm a little skeptical of Texas being great this year, and I think people are going to overreact because I think if Alabama played a really good team today, that it got killed, or it would have forced them to change their approach and go up tempo or something. But the fact that they kept giving Texas the ball at midfield and Texas only eked out the points they did, gives me a little pause. All right, getting into some super chats. Stephen Light,
you know, and we'll get into that too, right? You say play a good team and get killed, but how many of those are there, and what does that qualify as a good team?
I think that Purdue, Iowa, you know, Ohio State's a good precedent there because they ran into some huge crowds on the road at night, and those teams had some talent, and were able to exploit that. So I don't know.
Well, I don't think Iowa's doing that this year, though.
No, oh my goodness, and we might get into that later. But 7 points this week again.
They got it the honest way.
But the funny thing is, Josh, they almost still could have won that game. It's 10-7. That is wild.